Alright, the World Baseball Classic was just 1 year ago. The next one is 2 years away. Qualifiers are 1 year away. And right now they are talking about expanding those qualifiers from 12 to 16 teams, including Major League players on the qualifier teams. And we've got a pretty good idea where the qualifiers will be held. Nothing's final yet, but there is so much to talk about here. So many possibilities. Let's start with the timing of the qualifiers. The plan right now is to hold the qualifiers from the 6th of March to the 12th, a full year before the main tournament. This is not a new idea. If you'll remember, the qualifiers for the 2021 WBC were supposed to take place in early March of 2020. Teams were all set to start arriving at the qualifier locations when the COVID-19 outbreak forced the cancellation of the qualifiers. Shortly after, the MLB season was put on hold and pretty much everything in the world was postponed indefinitely. The big difference this time, though, is that supposedly active Major League players will be allowed to participate. Early March, so Caribbean Series is a month behind us. Opening day for MLB and all the major summer leagues of the world are still a few weeks away. Perfect time to hold the qualifiers. Same exact time of the year the WBC is held. Players can go from the qualifiers to spring training, from spring training to the qualifiers. Last time they had the qualifiers in the fall. There were some exciting games, but attendance was low. Countries were not able to field their very best players because their very best were playing in the Major League season. That's a turnoff to fans. Besides, at that time of year, they may be more interested in the race for the postseason than a WBC qualifier. In March, as we've seen with the main tournament of the WBC, fans will really turn up for an international baseball tournament when there's no other professional baseball going on, and it's so much better than watching practice games. Attendance was disappointingly low in the qualifier in Germany. A lot of that had to do with the weather, but I'm sure more German fans would have endured the cold rain if their one and only born and raised German MLB player Max Kepler had been on the field, not to mention a few other MLB players who would have been eligible to play, and they can't help but think maybe they could have qualified if those guys had been able to compete. Even in Panama, attendance was low. Ticket prices may have contributed to that problem, but those prices would have been worth it to more people if the Panamanians who play at the Major League level had been on the field. They did qualify, but when they won their final game, it wasn't a full house at Rod Carew Stadium like it should have been. One team that did not qualify in that pool was Brazil. You have to wonder how they would have done if they had all their Major League players, guys like Yan Gomez. Maybe they would have beaten Nicaragua. Of course, that means Nicaragua would have had Jonathan Loaisiga pitching. More elite competition, better time of the year, no other baseball going on. So if things go as planned, the qualifiers will be much bigger next time around. But where will the qualifiers be? Here's something I posted on X last March, right after pool play in the WBC ended. Assuming it was still 12 teams, 2 pools of 6 teams each. I had Taiwan, China, New Zealand, South Africa, Pakistan, and Germany competing in a pool in Taiwan. In the other pool, I had Colombia, Nicaragua, Brazil, Argentina, Spain, and France competing in Colombia. Well, the locations part of that seems to be coming true. Colombia submitted their bid to host one of the qualifier pools. 2 stadiums were toured, Estadio Once de Noviembre in Cartagena and Estadio Edgar Renteria in Barranquilla. In the past, 1 stadium was enough, but with 8-team qualifiers, if every team is going to play every day, the host will need 2 venues. A little background on those potential venues. Estadio de Once Noviembre is the classic ballpark in Colombia. Built in 1947, holds 12,000 people, home to Tigres de Cartagena of the Colombian Professional Baseball League, the LPB. For decades, it's been the signature stadium of Colombia. Estadio Edgar Renteria is the newest ballpark in the country. Built in 2018, it also seats 12,000, home to the country's most successful ball club, Caimanes de Barranquilla. It's being used as the host for major international events, and is quickly becoming the signature ballpark. I guess you could say that Estadio Once de Noviembre and Estadio Edgar Renteria are the Koshien and Tokyo Dome of Colombia. Why Colombia and not Nicaragua? Nicaragua, along with Colombia, is trying to re-qualify after making the big tournament in 2023, so that should give them just as much of a right to be the host for the qualifiers. They've got a proper venue, the 15,000-seat Estadio Dennis Martinez, along with several smaller capacity stadiums they could use. But Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega is quite a controversial figure, and the WBC would like to avoid controversy. It wouldn't be as controversial as if they tried hosting in Havana or Caracas, but this controversy is not only political, it also involves baseball. Dennis Martinez, the man the stadium is named after, nicknamed El Presidente, first Nicaraguan in MLB, 4-time All-Star, threw a perfect game. He has been very critical of President Ortega, so much that in late 2022, Martinez's name was removed from the facade, interior, logos, and social networks of the national stadium. It wouldn't be right to host a qualifier in Nicaragua, when the man who's considered the pride of Nicaraguan baseball, the man whose name graces the ballpark, would likely be against it. Another reason to choose Colombia is the potential for growth. Baseball is already the top sport in Nicaragua. It's not going to get any bigger there. But in Colombia, baseball is largely restricted to that northernmost part on the Caribbean coast, home to 11 million out of the country's 52 million people. The three largest cities in Colombia are located in the lower part of the country, where baseball is hardly known. It's that South American barrier that baseball has been trying to break through, where baseball's popularity ends in northern Colombia and Venezuela, and the sport kind of disappears as you move southward. In the past decade, over 2 million Venezuelans have resettled in all parts of Colombia, and they've brought baseball with them, so the sport is seen more throughout the country than it ever was any time before. The time is right for a big baseball event to get people in all parts of the country excited about baseball. I don't expect busloads of sports fans making the trip from Bogota to Barranquilla, but if nothing else, at least it would be nationally televised, and get all Colombians throughout the country to get behind their national baseball team. Taiwan is the obvious choice for the other host. What other country is going to have two modern venues up to international standards with seating capacities in the thousands, and have the ability to draw thousands of spectators? The other country besides Taiwan, that was a part of the big tournament last time and will have to requalify this time, is China. And China could probably have a couple venues ready if they were to be the host. Problem is, nobody would show up. They have a good enough team for the qualifiers, but not enough interest in the country to attract a sizable crowd. And China's presence could pose a problem for Taiwan as a host. Very likely they'll refuse to play in Taiwan. That was the probable reason, though not the stated reason, why they withdrew from the Olympic qualifiers 3 years ago. That was originally supposed to be in Taiwan. It was later moved and Taiwan themselves didn't even participate. If they were sticking to 6-team qualifiers where only one venue is needed, I would say that New Zealand could be an alternative. They do have one stadium that was renovated for baseball just 5 years ago, and now it's going unused. It can seat at least 5,000, probably more. They've had crowds of up to nearly 5,000 for playoff games. I'd imagine the WBC could attract the same or even larger crowds. But that's the only suitable venue they've got, so it's got to be Taiwan as the host. If China's willing to play there, great. If not, they'll have to play in the other pool in Colombia. Venues for the qualifier in Taiwan. Well, the one everyone will say right away is the new 40,000-seat Taipei Dome, just opened last year. It doesn't have a tenant team, so they're trying to find as much use for it as they can. Only problem is it might be too big. 40,000 seats and you might not even get 1,000 for some games. If they go to 4-team pools for the qualifier, the answer is easy. Whatever pool Taiwan is playing in, that's played at Taipei Dome. The go-to venue in the past decade has been Taichung Intercontinental Stadium. It can seat up to 20,000, which is probably all they would need anyway. If they want something smaller, there's no shortage of stadiums in Taiwan, anything from just a few thousand to over 10,000. And that brings us to the teams. Look again at what I suggested a year ago. They're grouped by location, as the WBC would likely do. They want to maximize attendance and give each country's local fans the best chance to make the trip and support their country. In Pool B, you have the host Colombia, Nicaragua, Brazil, Argentina, Spain, and France. So 3 countries in South America, another one nearby in Nicaragua, 2 from Europe, but one is Spain, which uses a lot of players from Latin America. France does too, though to a lesser extent. In Pool A, you've got Taiwan, China, New Zealand, South Africa, Pakistan, and Germany. That's 5 from the Asian and Pacific regions, plus Germany. I added Germany here to help with the balance of power between the 2 qualifiers, and Germany doesn't have as much of a Latin American connection as Spain and France do. But even with Germany in Pool A, it still looks like Pool B is much stronger. After Colombia and Nicaragua, you've got the 2 countries that finished 3rd in the qualifiers last time. China, the other team trying to requalify, would have to be seen as the weakest of the 4 relegated teams. I would probably pick Germany to upset China and qualify in Pool A, but if they were in Pool B, I'd have them finishing 4th or 5th. Adding to the imbalance is the fact that Curaçao will now be competing independently, not with the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Curaçao is located just off the coast of Venezuela. Naturally, you'd want them competing in the Colombian qualifier too. An independent Curaçao team would be favored to qualify. Still, only 2 teams will qualify. There's been no talk of expanding the field at the main tournament. Qualifying for the WBC would be harder this time around in Pool B than it was at either pool for the last WBC. But as I said before, China will likely refuse to play in Taiwan. In that case, they'll have no choice but to swap China and Nicaragua. You've got to have 2 teams relegated from the main tournament in each of the qualifier pools, and it's not going to be the host, so it's the only way. This will be too bad for any Nicaragua fans who wanted to make the trip and go see their country's best players in action, but it would be a much easier path to qualification. They can handle countries like Germany and South Africa, and would be picked by most to qualify out of Pool A, along with Taiwan. Pool B would still be the stronger of the two, but the imbalance would be more comparable to what it was last time, and not a ridiculous imbalance like it would be if you had Nicaragua in Pool B and China in Pool A. And those are only the returning teams from the last WBC and WBC qualifiers. Now we have to talk about the new teams. Each qualifier will be adding 2 more teams. We have to think about who the newcomers will be. Looking at the most recent WBSC World Rankings, the 4 highest ranked countries that were not already part of the WBC or WBC qualifiers last time are Belgium, Croatia, Curacao, and the Philippines. Of those 4, Curacao definitely has the most professional talent. Philippines is the only one that was previously a participant in the qualifiers. Countries close to those 4 include Austria, Sweden, Hong Kong, Guam, Ukraine, Greece, Switzerland, Hungary, Thailand, and so many more. It'll certainly place a lot more importance on the international tournaments this year, as countries will try to climb as many places in the rankings as they possibly can, in hopes of reaching the WBC qualifiers. They may not simply go by the highest ranked countries though, maybe one from each region. In that case you've got Belgium from Europe, Curacao from the Americas, the Philippines from Asia, and last would probably be Uganda out of Africa. Uganda is a country everyone wants to see in there, and nobody wants to see them get a chance at qualifying more than me. A bit lower in the rankings, they're number 48 right now, but it doesn't mean they're not as good as countries like Belgium or the Philippines. Another young athlete from Uganda just signed with the Dodgers organization last week. He's the 3rd member of the Dodgers system from Uganda. A really promising pitcher from Uganda is in the Pirates organization. A 3rd Ugandan player has signed on to play at a U.S. college. And a popular young catcher played in the MLB Draft League and Baseball United last year. All these players have come out of Uganda in the last 2 years, and the country really hasn't had a chance to compete with those players. It doesn't really matter which pool you put those 4 new countries in. I guess you'd want the Philippines in the Taiwan pool. The islands are very close. Maybe it could energize the Filipino fan base a little. And like I said before, Curacao will almost certainly be in the Colombian pool. And since we've already got South Africa in Pool A, we put Uganda in Pool B, so that Africa is fully represented. That leaves Belgium in Pool A, which now gives us 2 European teams in each pool, and it's all perfectly balanced. And there's also a chance they go with qualifiers for each region, like a European qualifier, an Asian qualifier, America's qualifier. Right now I'm assuming they don't do that and stick with mixed qualifiers, leaning more toward the region they're playing in. I like the idea of each region getting equal representation in the qualifiers, but not at the main tournament. That should be reserved for the top 20 teams in the world, regardless of what part of the world most of those countries come from. So here's what I have. Pool A, Taiwan, Nicaragua, New Zealand, South Africa, Pakistan, Germany, Belgium, and the Philippines. Pool B, Colombia, China, Curacao, Brazil, Argentina, Spain, France, and Uganda. The odds of one of these new teams making a Cinderella run to WBC qualification would be very slim. I don't see it happening. But they would be capable of pulling off a big upset and getting into maybe the top 4. Some possibilities like Philippines over New Zealand, Belgium over South Africa, or Uganda over China. It could make the qualifiers a lot more interesting. Last time, the only one I considered an upset was Argentina over New Zealand, and a very minor upset that was. With 8 teams in each pool, there's potential for some more shocking results. And finally, do I think this is a good idea? The answer is yes, I do. I think I've made that clear with the tone of this video up to this point. So much more can happen when you've got 8 teams rather than 6. There is such thing as having too many teams. If you expand the pool too much, you end up with countries that are just barely able to scrap together a national team. But in this case, you don't have to worry. Curacao has been the biggest part of the success of Team Netherlands. Belgium has long been one of the highest ranked countries not to be in a WBC qualifier. Philippines has already been there before. Uganda has more MLB prospects than some countries that are already part of the qualifiers. I wouldn't want any further expansion of the qualifiers right now, and I think they should keep the number of teams in the big tournament at 20. Like it was last time, at least for now. But expansion to 16 teams in the qualifiers is something I'm definitely in favor of. Anyway, that's just what I think. Let me know what you think down in the comments. That's all for this one, and until next time, this is Baseball International. See ya.